The humanities start with stories. Stories that connect us, that tell us who we are,
where we've been, and what we hope our future will be, which becomes increasingly important as science and technology advance exponentially.
The humanities help us address and reflect upon all of those complexities and experiences that make us human.
How culture shapes the way we understand gender.
And the meaning, context, and moral choices within a global pandemic.
The humanities enable teachers and their students to understand the past, gain insight into the present, and imagine possible futures.
Inspire pride, revitalization, and collaboration in rural communities through the development of traveling exhibits,
and give us the tools to understand and empathize with others, to build bridges between people and cultures.
The humanities help us make an unprecedented commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to address the history of systemic inequities and their current impact on health, education, and Indigenous rights, and the ways that arts and humanities are active parts of creating real change.
The humanities help us center the stories of people who have rarely been heard in the stories we tell,
and help us address historical trauma in rural Indo-Hispano communities by reducing social isolation, increasing social cohesion, and creating a positive social identity.
The Alaska Humanities Forum nominates the Kindling Conversation Program, Continuous Conversations, a program that is based on Jenny Irene Miller's ongoing portrait series, Continuous. Miller's portrait series was funded by the Alaska Humanities Forum in 2016 and lives on in the forum's programming through the Kindling Conversation Guide, Continuous Conversations. In an effort to preserve the impact of her work and in recognition that an understanding of gender impacts us all, the Alaska Humanities Forum partnered with Miller and the Pride Foundation to develop a conversation toolkit that could be used to continue the conversation that her work started. The guide directly implicates the viewer of the portraits by invoking a conversation about their own gender identity and the culture that raised them. Each of Miller's portraits is paired with a short story from the individual featured in her work and a powerful prompting question. The conversation centers on the guiding question: how does culture shape our understanding of gender?
California Humanities nominates Library Innovation Lab, a program which engages immigrants through humanities programming in California's public libraries. California has the largest immigrant population of any state. 27% of residents are immigrants, and almost half the state's children have at least one immigrant parent. To better reach this growing constituency, each year we provide 10 public librarians a year-long practice-based professional development experience. First, the cohort researches the needs and interests of local immigrant communities using a design thinking approach. Then, supported by experienced library mentors and their peers, design and deliver a suite of new humanities programs using $5,000 venture capital grants. From live story-sharing events to virtual reality visits back home, the programs aim to welcome immigrants and engage longtime residents to foster more inclusive communities. In the past 4 years, 33,000 Californians have engaged in programming at 42 partner libraries statewide, including 10 in 2019. Listen to Kate McMillan from San Luis Obispo Public Libraries.
By offering bilingual events, the library was able to bring the community together and educate people about resources and opportunities. At the end of the night, one father thanked us and said, "This is something my kids will always remember."
We nominate this program because we believe Library Innovation Lab is a sustainable model that builds long-term programming capacity and better equips statewide public humanities providers to serve all Californians.
Delaware Humanities nominates Destination Space, a program which commemorated the 50th anniversary of the moon landing and Delaware's essential role in this momentous occasion, as well as in past, present, and future space exploration. Through a traveling exhibit created by Delaware Humanities, lectures, book discussions, an essay contest, an oral history workshop, partner events, and re-grants, we shed light on the importance of the humanities in the conversation about science, technology, and our collective future. With Destination Space, we were able to strengthen current partnerships, create new connections, and engage with new and diverse audiences. A highlight of our year of the Humanities in Space was bringing astronaut and educator Leland Melvin to Dover, Delaware, where he captivated our audience of kids 5 years old to seniors in their 80s. Astronaut Melvin's story of hurdles, hard work, and his lifelong belief in the power of the humanities and the arts left us all inspired. Through Destination Space, we encouraged all Delawareans to seek knowledge, reflect on information, and become engaged. As one program participant stated, by, quote, giving information to people who are interested and willing empowers them to take ownership and get involved, end quote. Delaware Humanities boldly went where we have never gone before, and the experience was beyond rewarding.
The New Mexico Humanities Council nominates the Manitos Community Memory Project, conducted in partnership with New Mexico Highlands University, as well as with libraries, museums, and nonprofits in the Indo-Hispano villages of northern New Mexico. The project is set within a region deeply impacted by historical trauma due to loss of land, language, cultural artifacts, and knowledge that has been continually mined by others with no reciprocity. Within this context of extractive practice, we adopted a restorative framework for helping partners build a digital community archive. So far, 12 community partners have received equipment and training to establish memory labs where staff can digitize and add items from their collection to the archive, and where community historians can access digitization equipment and technical support for gathering and uploading new content. Paid student interns from the Media, Arts, and Technology Department at New Mexico Highlands University participate in what we call Activating the Archive, learning how to create meaningful engagement with Manito history and storytelling through experimentation with state-of-the-art cultural technology. Project participants have expressed feeling informed and empowered through access to archival and media skills, field collection technology, and a supportive regional network already built building meaningful connections around a shared heritage.
South Carolina Humanities is pleased to nominate South Carolina, the Food We Celebrate, a traveling exhibit that celebrates iconic foods from communities around South Carolina. South Carolina Humanities and the South Carolina State Museum collaborated with 20 organizations across the Palmetto State to develop the content for the exhibit, highlighting 20 different iconic foodways such as barbecue, chicken bog, peaches, and more. The project began as a way to encourage pride and revitalization in small towns and communities. SC Humanities used its connections to engage local museums, scholars, and other cultural organizations to develop a sustainable resource. This collaborative effort was designed to motivate small-town museums to innovate and modernize and connect with other institutions around the state. Don Wells Bridges of Spartanburg, South Carolina said, "The well-designed panels told the story of our state as revealed through its foods, its history and its presence, its work and its people. After viewing the exhibit, I was so impressed that I went home and made a big pot of chicken bog, typically a food cooked in a large kettle served at the end of a harvest to all of the workers."
In late 2018, Vermont Humanities made a radical choice. We chose a comic book for our prestigious Vermont Reads One Book reading program. As it turns out, the narrative and artistic structure of the book was hardly the most radical choice behind choosing March Book 1 by Representative John Lewis, Andrew Iden, and Nate Powell. Rather, choosing this graphic history of the civil rights movement for our statewide reading program cemented a shift in our organizational perspective and turned Vermont Humanities into a statewide leader in conversations about racism and equity. The project engaged thousands of Vermonters and hundreds of organizations in all 14 counties of the state, from the largest arts presenters to the smallest town libraries. The culminating event, a visit by Congressman Lewis and his co-author Andrew Iden, reached more people than any other single event in our organization's history. Learning with great humility from both our successes and our mistakes, Vermont Humanities is now continuing the journey with Vermont Reads 2020, The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. We make mistakes every day in our anti-racism journey, but we stand up, dust ourselves off, and try again to make a difference. In the words of Congressman Lewis, we are committed to using the lens of the humanities to make good trouble, necessary trouble.
Humanities Montana nominates our weekly digital and DIY humanities email. In the early weeks of the pandemic, a nationwide survey found that 61.5% of Americans said they felt socially isolated most of the time. In March, our staff began producing interactive emails to meet Montanans where they are at, isolated in their homes, offices, and classrooms in rural and urban communities. Each edition contains an address to the reader from staff, humanities perspectives and philosophical questions, and original videos featuring local scholars and writers. Between 700 and 1,000 people read our digital and DIY email each week. We know it is having an impact because of the many replies we get back. One reader, Natalie, wrote, "I so appreciate the accessible and very well-considered content, and I often find myself thinking about the topics, readings, and videos for days. The newsletter helps us find time for critical thinking and creativity while we live our everyday lives."
Indiana Humanities nominates In Slow Moments, which reinvented our Next Indiana Campfires program for the age of social distancing. We designed 4 ways for Hoosiers to find renewal, refuge, relaxation, and reflection by attending a virtual trek, watching or making a slow moment film, using our Campfires anthology to plan a hike, or reading a short essay by an Indiana author. We believe In Slow Moments is utterly unique, combining as it does slow TV-style films, original essays, experimental virtual programs, a social media campaign, and prompts for individual or small group reflection and conversation. It's a wonderful expression of our organizational culture, which values nimbleness and a willingness to experiment, projects that lay at the intersection of programs and communications, as well as a commitment to collaboration and to producing resonant, beautiful multimedia products. We are proud of the way our small team imagined and implemented this project on a short timeline during an incredibly stressful period, as well as the ways that it provided our audiences with calm, comfort, escape, and opportunities for quiet and reflection in the midst of COVID-19's chaos. For all of these reasons, Indiana Humanities is excited to nominate In Slow Moments for a 2020 Schwartz Prize for outstanding council programming developed or adapted in response to COVID-19.
Humanities Kansas nominates Responding to the Moment, Connecting Kansans in 2020, a collection of humanities at home programming and grant opportunities developed in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and nationwide protests for racial equality. When stay-at-home orders were issued, HK rolled out Movement of Ideas Kits, a series of blog posts with curated humanities content to engage Kansans at home. New, quick grants helped organizations pivot their programs online, resulting in podcasts and virtual museum tours. The brand new Dial-A-Speaker and Dial-A-Talk programs adapted HK's popular in-person history and literature programs into mini presentations available to all Kansans over the phone. When the moment called for engagement and a discussion about race and identity, HK partnered with community cultural organizations for projects such as Topeka's We Read Frederick Douglass and Wichita's Say My Name. Collectively, these programs and grants reached over 300,000 Kansans, proving that the need for humanities connection and engagement increases during times of crisis.
We at Michigan Humanities knew that we weren't doing enough to really address diversity, equity, and inclusion in the work that we were doing. So we made an unprecedented commitment to how we could look introspectively at the work that we were doing, as well as reach out to our statewide partners to improve arts and cultural communities and be a part of real change. We've done so through the creation of the Bridging Michigan programs, and we're so excited about the response we've received and how we can make an impact through this important conversation and grant-making work.
Nevada Humanities is proud to nominate our program, Humanities Heart to Heart, a series of essays and multimedia reflecting on life during COVID-19, for the 2020 Schwartz Prize in the category of COVID-19 responses. During this time when all areas of life have been universally disrupted and we can no longer safely gather together in person, we envision a program that would still connect people across our state and let Nevadans know that they are not alone. Humanities Heart to Heart was launched in July 2020 and will be ongoing throughout the duration of the pandemic. Every week, we share reflections ranging from written essays to poems to original artwork on our website and social media platforms. Heart to Heart has featured stories of grief and resilience and hope and sadness, written by students, new Nevadans, published writers and poets, and folks who we have never worked with before. We have shed light on the experience of casino workers out of work, what it's like to live on a rural ranch during lockdown, and more. It's important to us that we highlight a wide range of voices, giving everyone an equal platform and opportunity with which to share their experience. Our program is a much-needed forum in our state for people to share these deeply personal heart-to-hearts, and we're glad to see that it's been well received. Since its inception, our web traffic has increased at least 60%, and we have received many comments thanking us for this creative and cathartic outlet through which people can process their pandemic experience. We are proud to continue supporting our communities through shared human experience and storytelling, and to give us all courage to move forward together.
Humanities Texas nominates our new online teacher professional development programs. In the spring, our staff quickly transitioned our in-person teacher programs, which have served more than 6,000 Texas teachers over the past decade, to an online format. Between April and early August, we held 13 webinars and 7 multi-day online institutes on topics ranging from the history of the Cold War to the diverse voices of the American literary tradition. In all, these programs comprised more than 60 scholarly presentations and served nearly 2,000 teachers in all corners of the state. These teachers represent all of our 36 U.S. congressional districts and teach more than 150,000 students each year. The new online format, we learned, significantly broadened the program's accessibility and facilitated development of important new partnerships. After participating in one of the programs, a teacher from Houston wrote, "The fostering of community between scholars, veteran teachers, and new teachers brought forth great minds to strive towards one common goal, to improve the learning experience of students in Texas. The collaborative space that Humanities Texas created ensured that underserved student populations will be more prepared to not only meet the state's expectations, but for higher education as well." In a profoundly difficult time for teachers and students everywhere, Humanities Texas is proud of these programs, which enable us to better fulfill a significant part of our mission to improve the quality of humanities education in Texas.
Humanities Washington nominates cabin fever questions for the Schwartz Prize. Washington State was one of the first to be affected by COVID-19, and daily life was quickly upended. To help people process what was happening and provide context for and solace from the rush of bad news, Humanities Washington responded quickly with cabin fever questions. Distributed several times per week on social media and email, cabin fever questions provided humanities-based discussion topics and resources for our lives in quarantine. We asked such questions as, how do you define happiness? And how do we remain informed without feeling overwhelmed? And paired each question with readings to expand the discussion. For parents struggling to keep kids engaged and occupied, we created Cabin Fever Kids. The response was tremendous. Organizations not typically working in the humanities, such as Washington State's Department of Health and Yellowstone National Park, embraced the project. Families read them at the dinner table, and many people asked us to compile them in book format. But the reaction to cabin fever questions is perhaps best summarized in one reader's feedback. Quote, "Now this is the kind of email I want to get in these challenging times."